Hello. Hi, Rock.
Hey
How are
Karen,
you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Perfect. Good to be here and to talk about the state of Agentic AI report. It's been published a few months ago, I feel already. So just a quick overview about ourselves. I'm Karen. I'm leading security detection I'd always say Apex because Apex got acquired by Tenable a few while ago. So I'm leading the threat research, the AI, the data for AI, and the product over here. And I'm also co-leading the top 10 for Agentic AI at OWASP. And Rock with me.
Yeah, I'm Rock Lambert, everyone. I'm the CEO and founder of Rock Cyber. We're a cybersecurity and AI consulting company based in Denver, Colorado.
Perfect. So we're going to talk about the state of agentic AI today. And I think all of you probably think that we're going to talk about theoretical concepts, but this slide came in first because we want to talk about what it's already here. So this prompt that you see in here is the one that I took from a client of mine from a real Fortune 500 company, a user trying to actually access some sensitive data and asking about specific person and if it is a bad manager. And by the way, I can assure you that the chat answered that he is a bad manager. So let's talk about how we got in here. Why agentic AI taxonomy even matter and why we treat it in the report. So I think what's important to understand is that agentic AI risk is not one size fits all. It depends on the context, what environment is the agent operating in, what are the connections, so what are the inputs and outputs, for example, which data is connected, what are the systems that connected to the agent, and what other AI are interacted with the agent. So external connections, such tools and other agents, MCP servers, and all the fun buzzwords. The interactions. So what is the nature of interactions with the agent? How users are using the AI or how automated processes are being done using these agents. It all affects the risk profile of the agent. So let's start and talk about the most adopted type of agents, which is the enterprise AI agents. And you're probably familiar with this type of agents that's designed to support and enhance the internal processes of the companies. So almost anybody today work with Microsoft Copilot, Google Gemini, or ChatGPT Enterprise in the organization that's actually supposed to support your operations and to enhance your productivity, right? So what happens and what is nature to those type of agent is that they operate within the enterprise environment. They can access sensitive internal data, right, in order to operate and be efficient. They usually connected to RAG pipelines or to the database connections, and they frequently interacted with function calling in order to actually do something, right? They need to execute a tool, they need to call another agent to actually execute a functionality. So what is risky about those agents is the way that they are integrated into the enterprise. So context poisoning, I think it's the most surprising attack that attackers shouldn't be compromising users anymore in order to affect your operations and in order to access your data. Imagine an attacker that's sending an email, right? And in this email, he puts invisible characters in order to do a prompt injection to affect the agent. So that's what we call the context poisoning, right? RBAC gaps is, I think, everyone knows that RBAC never worked, okay? It's the hardwood. We should talk about it. We should say it. And although, we're trying to control the access control on the permissions, there will always be those users that create a new deck, not providing it with the right permissions, and users are curious. We will see it soon, how the insider threat amplified by the agentic AI. And the operational integration risk is even higher because even without any adversarial manipulation, having automated agents that are non-determinist, and we'll talk all about it very soon, really escalates the risk that can happen to the operations. The other types of agents are client-facing agents, and those are agents that usually serves external users, and they usually do customer service, support, and etc. So they're externally facing and usually are being built by fine-tuning foundation models or configuring pre-built agents to really being able to be excellent at the one job that we want them to be. So we tailor them using system prompt and task-specific context to help them be good at the task. And as we said, there's a lot of chatbots that are integrated um, and implemented by Agentic AI. And of course, they are frequently connected to external tools because they need to execute something. So what is we see that is risky about those agents is that we expand the attack surface, right? So it's not only insiders that can access the agentic AI, but also external users can manipulate and use the AI in some sort of ways that we wouldn't want them to use it, right? So it's not only about getting sensitive data, but also like getting the AI to do what it's not intended to do. Remember this I think it was a guy that bought a Ferrari at $1, right? Exactly this use case. And we already talked about the abuse that could happen. So the last type of agents that we're going to cover today is the agentic ecosystem. And those are agents that can collaborate together to complete a bigger task better. We're talking about two different types of agentic families. So the first one will be mass multi-agent systems that are tightly coupled. So it means that they have a shared memory and a centralized coordination. They're all working together as an entire whole system. And they have a state management. And the other type is the loosely coupled agents that work independently, and each of them does the task that is specialized in. And together they create a bigger comprehensive picture. So what we see that is risky about that, and we talk about it a lot in the report, is that we got a cross-agent communication. So it's not only that user communicate with the AI, it's now that other agents can connect to the AI that we have, to the agent that we have, and to have a more complicated state of inputs and outputs, right? So if those agents are external, it becomes even riskier, and the trust boundary gaps becomes even harder to manage. And it's very hard for us to have a centralized oversight over all of those connections and inputs and outputs that we need to look at. Another concept that I want to take you through, and we'll talk about it in the report, and it applying to all of those agent types that we talked about before, is the non-determinism concept of AI. And we had AppSec before, right? So we had services that serving customers, but what is different about agentic AI? We had services working together as a system. We had services working in the enterprise environment, but why is it different when we're talking about agentic AI? So the thing is that LLMs are probabilistic, so they're non-deterministic, and it means that the same input could cause another output. And I wanted to test it very quickly. So I just logged into my own ChatGPT. I haven't done any manipulation, but just asking who is the best singer of all times. The first time it answered Whitney Houston, which I think is acceptable. The other time, which was a second after that, it was Freddie Mercury. Both opinions are valid, but I'd expect it to give me, there isn't a fine line that I can say, okay, that's why I answered it, right? So we cannot expect what the AI will answer. And the reason that it's a bit, I think, tricky when we're talking about agentic AI is that the outputs are actually influenced by the context windows, by the way that the prompts are being phrased, and by the actual state of the AI of the agent. So in agent, the non-determinism can extend into the tool that the AI selects to use, the task planning, and the actual interaction that it has with the users or with another agent or tool. So the multi-step reasoning also amplifies this behavior and execution, and we cannot know how it's going to look like. And it's very hard for us to do reproducing, right? Because we do not know what to expect next. So when we're talking about like incident response, when we're talking about forensic analysis, it's very hard to guess what will happen and what the agent will do. And suddenly security baselines become fluid. There is not like a flow that we can actually expect. Another risk that we're covering in the report in the threat analysis part is the insider threat that's being multiplied by the agentic AI. And I already showed you in the first slide real prompt that we've seen in real client environment, in real company. And I think what for me been terrifying in this is that it's just the human nature, right? So no adversarial should be made, and no, not malicious users should be in the picture, but those are just curious users that in all time, if they wanted to access sensitive information, then they should have been digging through the, let's say, SharePoint or Google Drive and look for the specific sensitive data that they're aiming for, let's say CEO salary. Now they just have to ask. And usually there won't be any detection over it because security guidelines and usual system are not looking for this type of interactions. It's all new. So the key scenarios that we're worried about are data exfiltration. That's the exact use case that we just covered. So users that are trying to get access to sensitive information faster and easier, and internal users that are trying to trigger malicious behavior and to affect workflows, and of course, to actually affect those workflows in action. So the problem is that, as we said, all actions appear legitimate and authorized, like the user have done nothing wrong, as it seems to be, and it's very difficult to reverse and to audit without having like the exact visibility into the prompt and without actively looking into it. So let's talk about a few examples, because I think till I haven't seen it in my own eyes, it was theoretical to me. I was thinking, okay, people are curious, but we will really ask the AI, the agentic AI, problematic questions. And this is what I see on daily basis, tens and thousands of messages from Fortune 500 companies across all sectors. Users want to know more. So these users ask if the agentic AI can find which funds invested and in what amounts in the equity. This is specifically an investment firm. Another user super worried about the current status and type of transactions in the company portfolio and how the pipeline is going to look like in 24 months. Do you know which was this user, like from which department the user is? Rock, do you have any guess?
Janitorial services.
No, it was actually just a developer. So I don't think any developer needs to know that for his work, but that's what happened. And then another user asking about a list of new equity deals, and specifically for Meg and the ownership percentage, super detailed. Another user asking a situation of specific account. Imagine this information being leaked. Asking about NDA files and getting the entire NDA details. I don't want to be the CISO of this company, really. I don't want to be. Another user asking about the salary compared to other people in the same level. So this user actually, she got a response and she got like the full list of salaries of people in the company. And you know how it is today, like one picture to WhatsApp group and everybody knows about that. So I call it the data breach of 2025. Another user asking about NDAs, and all those screenshots are just in a time frame of a few days, right? So it is actually real. And now that I scared you, I apologize, but I'll give the mic to Rock.
Thanks, Karen. So I'm going to take this in a different direction and talk a little bit about the global regulatory and compliance landscape. As you know, it has kind of been all over the map. It is very rapidly changing, but there are, kind of three primary pillars that we should keep an eye on. Karen, next slide, please. So first, we have the recently released EU General Purpose for AI Code of Practice. So even though this framework is voluntary, it is a good playbook with regard to on-ramping your AI systems in a responsible manner. So the European Commission published the Code of Practice back on July 10th of this year, 2025. As I mentioned, it's voluntary, and the Commission and the AI Board in the EU recognize it as an adequate way for model providers to show that they're on track for their EU AI Act obligations. So the general purpose for AI, or GPAI obligations, the first kind of tranche went into effect back in August 2nd of this year. But the full application of the law, and it'll be fully implemented by August 2nd of 2027. So the maximum fines are kind of similar to GDPR in such that they reach 35 million euros or 7% of global turnover for the absolute worst violations. And we'll see how that's adjudicated. It does define systemic risk models. And how does it do that? It defines systemic risk models by presuming that the training was above 10 to the 25th flops. So, kind of treat this code of practice. I would treat this code of practice as kind of your documentation backbone and your safety case outline as you bring in new general purpose AI systems online. And, the question I will pose to you is, do you know what your threshold is? Do you know if your model was trained at above 10 to the 25 flops? I'm pretty geeky and nerdy, and I couldn't tell you. I've never had that conversation with a developer. Next slide, please, Karen. All right, now we have America's AI action plan coming from the White House. There's a lot of news about it when it first released. It was very polarizing, but I think we could pull out some pretty good nuggets. Whereas if the EU code of practice was kind of like a roadmap to on-ramp a safe and reliable and responsible AI system, the White House action plan is the roadmap for speed and scale with proof. So it lists more than 90 federal actions across 3 pillars, which are accelerate innovation, build AI infrastructure, and lead in international security and diplomacy. So keep an eye out for 2 signals. First, compute access and research capacity via the National AI Research Resource Operations Center. And then agency demand for measurable outcomes of procurement, right? So this is very U.S. federal government facing framework. However, because of the significant infrastructure investments involved, private industry are absolutely going to be impacted. We're already seeing this through Project Stargate with a collaboration of Oracle, OpenAI, Microsoft, and others to build AI data centers and invest in this infrastructure. And there are also provisions in the plan for essentially granting research credits to AI developers to kind of shared GPU systems across the federal government to facilitate innovation at scale. And also to help bring kind of the working demos to light with stronger cost controls. Next slide, please, Karen. And then we have a kind of a dichotomy with the China's global AI governance action plan. So whereas many people could read the America's AI action plan as more isolated and nationalistic, and nationalist, I should say, China's global AI governance action plan is actually promoting more global cooperation. So we're living in a little bit of a bizarre world where the US is becoming more isolationist and China is purporting and claiming to be more cooperative, at least in the AI arena. I'm skeptical. We'll see how it plays out. But the China plan is a 13-point agenda announced back in July of this year, July 26th, and it proposes 2 new United Nations mechanisms and pushes standards coordination through ISO, IEC, and ITU. So you pair that with a domestic goal of more than 50 new AI standards by 2026. This is domestic within China, and rising leadership across international standards bodies. And their pitch is open cooperation, right? The play is, in my opinion, being China driving the de facto global standard and creating dependency leverage, which is smart. And so again, I would kind of enter this and take a look at it with disciplined skepticism. Next slide, please. Thank you. And now let's compare some of these and talk about some practical actions, right? So this contrast actually drives decisions. Europe offers a voluntary code that previews enforcement and gives you artifacts regulators expect. The US rewards performance and deployment speed with many federal actions and growing research infrastructure. China, on the other hand, seeks to shape the rulebook itself through UN-linked bodies and aggressive standard setting. So, like the strategy that I would have dropped is harmonize to the strictest durable baseline, which is the EU Code of Conduct, the Code of Practice. So use that to harden your documentation. Win by creating your pilots within the US and by defending measurable outcomes, and then insulate against standards capture in kind of Chinese-led venues. And with that, next slide, Karen.
Perfect.
Wrapping
Thank
it
you.
up.
I love it. I think just to end it up, I think we created this report to give a better overview because us got so many materials about AI and agentic AI, and we wanted to create one document that set the stage to the all other documents. So if you want to get started into agentic AI, if you're new to it, or if you want like a high level executive summary, so called, I think this document could be very great beginning for you. Any additions, Rock?
No, absolutely. It was great to work on this document. It is so comprehensive. The landscape is changing so rapidly. We could have released 2.0 the day after this version was released because of the changes in the landscape from the time we sent the paper to publication to the time the day it was released. So definitely an interesting space to keep an eye on.
Absolutely. And John and Ron, my colleagues from the OS Top 10 for Agentic AI, will probably talk about it too. But I invite all of you watching us to join our effort creating the Top 10 for Agentic AI together. So if you want to join our effort, please DM me, John, DM Ron, Rock, or anyone from the team to join the effort. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just go to also mention the website, genai.owasp.org.
You're the best.
No, you're the best.
Have a good day.
Bye, everyone.